Hi, I'm so excited because today we'll be sewing the Arlo Vest together. This is a full sew-along video for my new sewing pattern that I just released over on Etsy. It comes in a full size range from 0 to 34, as well as 3 options for you to choose from: printing at home, copy shop, or projecting. It features a high crew neck with a row of small buttons down the center front, as well as a beautiful curved hem that opens up around your waist level. This is a fully lined vest, which does make the construction a little bit more tricky, but I'm confident that between the sew-along video and the step-by-step instructions, you'll be able to make your own vest by the end of this. Before we dive into the construction of the garment, I did want to quickly touch on the fabric. I highly recommend using something medium to lightweight, for example, linen, cotton, or even lightweight denim. Personally, I'll be using this beautiful chocolate brown medium weight linen from Blackbird Fabrics. It's got beautiful drape and texture to it. I've already pre-washed the fabric and I still have to iron it, and then we can get right into it.
When you print out your pattern, this is what it's going to look like. Use the test squares to make sure that everything printed at 100% scale and trim off 2 of the edges. I like to use the little triangles to line up my pages as well as the actual pattern itself. This part is a little bit time consuming, but try to tape your pattern as accurately as you can and cut out all your pattern pieces. The pattern does come layered, so turn off the sizes that you don't want and only print the ones that you do so that you save on ink and it's not too confusing to look at. Before cutting into your fabric, lay out all your pattern pieces on the fabric to make sure you have enough, and make sure to follow the grain line indicated on each pattern piece. Mark all your notches either by snipping into the fabric or using some chalk. This will help you line up your pieces together when you're sewing at a later stage. You're going to mark out the position of your welt pockets and the fisheye darts. You can either cut it out of the paper pattern piece and use that as a template to trace out the position, or you can insert some pins into your fabric and use chalk to mark the points. Starting with the back, we're going to sew the fisheye darts on both the main and the lining fabric. I like to pinch the tips of my dart so that I'm able to fold the fabric and the 2 legs of the dart will match. Use a lot of pins so that everything lines up, and you're going to sew from one end of the dart to the other without backstitching. Make sure you leave longer thread tails so that you can secure your darts with a knot. Repeat this for the lining, and then you're going to press each dart towards the side seam. Set that aside because we're going to work on the welt pockets next. Start off by interfacing 2 of the welt pocket pieces on the wrong side of the fabric. Then you're going to fold the pieces lengthwise, wrong sides together, and press. Measure the width of the welt pocket on the front pattern piece. On both sides of the welt pocket piece, you're going to mark 1 centimeter in from the folded edge. Then on one side, you're going to mark the width of the welt pocket that you just measured on the front pattern piece. On the other 2 welt pocket pieces, you're going to also mark 1 centimeter in from one of the edges on both sides, as well as the width of the welt pocket on one of the sides. Grab the front bodice and place it right side facing up. You're going to place the welt pocket piece without interfacing on the front bodice, right sides together. Make sure you align the horizontal line of the welt pocket piece with the top edge of the welt pocket on the front bodice as I'm showing you, and you're going to sew from one corner to the other along the marked line. It's going to look something like this, and you're going to want to press or pin the lower edge of the welt pocket upwards for the next step. Place the other welt pocket piece with interfacing on the front bodice. The folded edge will be closer to the hem with the horizontal line lined up with the lower edge of the welt pocket this time. Once again, you're going to sew from one corner to the other along that horizontal line. Press that towards the hem so that you're able to expose the actual welt pocket opening. Then you're going to carefully cut down the middle of the welt pocket on the front bodice, but you're going to stop 1 centimeter away from the edge. Snip as close as you can to each corner without cutting into the stitching so that you create 2 little triangles on both sides. Be very, very careful at this step. If you don't cut close enough to the corners, you're going to have some puckering at the edges, but if you cut too much, your welt pocket opening is going to be too big for the welt pocket pieces that you have. Push the welt pocket pieces through the slit you just made towards the wrong side of the front bodice. It's going to take a little bit of finesse, but you should have something that resembles a welt pocket at this stage. Right side facing you, if you fold one edge of the bodice, you'll see the little triangle that we cut. You're going to want to sew the triangle down to the seam allowance of the welt pocket on both edges. Try to do it as close as you can to the fold so that you have a clean, straight edge from the right side. From the right side, align and pin the welt pocket so that we can sew the lower edge of the welt pocket shut. Try to sew along the existing stitching on the seam allowance. Take a moment because you're done with the hardest part of this vest. Trim away the seam allowance for a clean finish, and we're going to move on to the waist ties next. Fold the waist ties in half or right sides together. You're going to sew along one of the short edges, pivot, then sew along the long edge with 1/2 centimeter seam allowance. I'm using a loop turner to overturn my strap, but if you don't have one, you can also use needle and thread as I show you in the written instructions. If you're using a heavier fabric like denim, it might be really difficult to overturn your straps, so consider folding it into quarters like you would with bias tape and top stitch it instead. Press the ties and then you're going to pin them to the right side of the back bodice piece at the waist notch. Sew them in place with a 1/2 centimeter seam allowance. It's all going to come together really fast now. Right sides facing, place your front and your back bodice pieces and align them at the shoulder seams. Sew them down with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Remember to repeat it for the lining. For both the main and the lining, press the shoulder seams open. Place your main vest on top of your lining, right sides facing. Start by aligning the neckline corners, the front hem notch, and the shoulder seams. Use a lot of pins to keep everything in place because we're going to sew all around in the next step. Starting from the notch along the front hem, you're going to sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance between the notches. So that means you're going to go up the center front, around the neckline, down the other center front towards the other front hem notch. Now that your main and your lining are attached, you're going to snip into the seam allowance around the curved edges of the hem and the neckline to release some tension once we overturn the vest. Also snip off the corners of the neckline. We're going to understitch the seam that we just sewed in the previous step, starting and stopping a few centimeters away from the front hem notch. This is going to help prevent your lining from peeking out when you're wearing the vest, but also stabilize your seam so that it doesn't stretch out over time. If you've never understitched before, you're going to pull the main fabric and the lining apart, folding the seam allowance towards the lining. From the right side, you're going to sew the seam allowance down to the lining using a straight stitch as close as possible to the original seam. Right sides facing, you're going to match up the armholes for the main and the lining, pin them together, and sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Similar to the neckline, we're going to snip into the seam allowance around the curved edges of the armhole so that we can release the tension once we overturn everything. You're going to reach into the back hem between the main and the lining, through the shoulder to grab the front hem and pull it through. You're going to do this for both sides of the vest, and then we're going to press the hem, center front, neckline, and armholes. We're going to sew the side seams now. This part is a little bit tricky, but basically you're going to place the vest in front of you, separate the main front side seam from the lining, similarly separate the main back side seam from the lining, and you're going to match up the corners as I'm showing you and pin all along the side seam until you reach the underarm seam. Make sure you match up your underarm seams for a clean finish, and you're going to repeat the same thing for the lining. It's going to look a little bit twisted up, but trust the process. You're going to sew all along the seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Repeat this for the other side seam as well. This is the perfect time to press the side seams because we'll be closing the hem next. I like to press the seam allowance for the main and the lining in different directions to reduce bulk in the underarm seam as much as possible. Once again, we're going to overturn the vest through the gap in the hem. Align the hem of the main and the lining and sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance, making sure to leave a gap between the fisheye darts because we still need to turn it right side out. This is just going to save us a bit of hand sewing in the next step. At this stage, you'll be left with a small gap between the fisheye darts. One last time, you're going to overturn the vest right sides out. Fold the hem of the main and the lining under by 1 centimeter towards the inside of the vest and press. We'll be closing up the remaining gap with an invisible ladder stitch. Thread your needle and secure it with a knot. Insert the needle along the folded edge of your lining and alternate with the main fabric so that your stitches look like a ladder. I've added a diagram on the side so it's easier for you to visualize exactly what's happening. We're so close to finishing, we just have the buttons and the buttonholes left. On the right side of the vest when you're wearing it, mark a vertical line 1.5 centimeters from the center front. First button is placed 1.5 centimeters below the neckline. The top of each subsequent buttonhole is spaced 4 centimeters apart. Add your buttonholes and mark another vertical line 1.5 centimeters away from the other center front. This will be where you attach your buttons.
Congratulations, we're all done with the Arlo Vest. I hope you enjoyed sewing this as much as I did. I'm really happy with how this brown linen version turned out. I did swap out the buttons to shell buttons to give a little bit more texture and contrast, and I'm really happy with how this looks. If you're sharing your vest to social media, please tag me. I would love to see them, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!